بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, this is lecture number 14 or part 14 of our series on the blessed land of Palestine. Previously, we spoke about the surrender of the city of Jerusalem to the second Khalif of Islam, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anh. And this was in the year 637 of the Christian calendar. And thereafter we spoke about the assurance that Umar radiyallahu anh gave to the Christians of Jerusalem. And this assurance is known as the assurance of Umar, where certain rules were put into place and certain agreements were concluded, and this assurance stayed intact, and the Muslims honored this assurance from that date 637 right up until 1917, when the British took control of Palestine towards the end of the Ottoman Empire. Thereafter, Umar radiallahu anhu set forth cleaning the area which is Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the blessed area, the area in which the prophets, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's peace be upon them, worshipped Dawood and Sulaiman and those after them. In this area here, Umar ibn al-Khattab rebuilt the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and he built a structure at that time which was capable of holding 3,000 worshippers. What we did speak about was one of the rules that were put into the agreement, and it was a rule or one of the points of the agreement or the assurance that was asked for by the Christians of Jerusalem and by the Patriarch Sophronius. And that was that no Jew reside within the city of Jerusalem, the same way that no Roman who was not from the original inhabitants would reside within Jerusalem. And we understand why no Roman, because at that time the Muslims were fighting the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire. However, why did the Christians ask that no Jew reside within the city? There are many reasons that could have led to this request. However, I want to look at things historically to clarify the relationship between the Jews and the Christians at that time and the sentiment that existed. If you look at the events that occurred closest to this time, we said that in 614, the Persians invaded this land and took it from the Romans, and there is mentioned in the first few ayat of Surah Ar-Rum, غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم, that the Romans have been conquered. في أدنى الأرض, in the lowest land, and there is a miracle of the Quran, because the lowest land we know on earth is at the Dead Sea in Palestine, on the Palestinian-Jordanian border. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about this. But what were the events that actually occurred? The Jews who were living at that time in the diaspora, like we had discussed previously, agreed to fight alongside the Persians against the Romans so that they would then be able to live in the land of Palestine. They did so, and the Persians defeated the Romans and they entered the land of Palestine. When they entered the land of Palestine, they participated in atrocities worse than what the Persians were doing. They did not differentiate between any man, woman, or child. They slaughtered everybody that they could find in Jerusalem. They participated in the breaking and burning and demolition of Christian holy sites, churches, and so on and so forth, and desecrating any site that the Christians held sacred. And this event occurred. Those that survived this event and saw what the Jews had done at the hands, what the Christians had suffered at the hands of the Jews when they allied themselves to the Persians, by no means were willing to let the Jews back into the city. Immediately after these events, the Persians did not hold true to their pact. They did allow them to live in the lands. However, they taxed them heavily, and the Jews thereafter, or the Israelites thereafter, as is known through history, were treacherous and betrayed the Persians and joined the Romans, or some of them joined the Romans, and the Romans took back Jerusalem. When the Romans took back Jerusalem at the hands of Heraclius had promised them access to Jerusalem and freedom to live there. However, upon entering Jerusalem, those Christians who survived this attack and were still in the land of Palestine or around those areas, forced and encouraged Heraclius not to hold true to this pact, reminding him of what the Jews had done to the Christians before that, and explaining to him how they had massacred the Christians, men, woman, and child, how they had destroyed the churches and desecrated holy places. And this enraged Heraclius. As we said, Heraclius was a man of knowledge. He knew what was in the Christian scriptures. And at that point, he did not hold true to this pact, and he slaughtered every Jew he could find that was in the army or that had been present at that time. And this was the end of Judaism in Jerusalem, or any Jew being present in that land. So this could have been one of the events that precipitated this agreement, or this point being added to the agreement. The second thing is that historically, we can see that as long as the Jews as a nation, as a people, are present in this land or in lands, we always find havoc and problems. There's always problems, there's havoc, there's lots of betrayal, political problems, economic problems, social problems. All of these things occur. And these are not my words. Look at it historically and you'll know. And they knew it at the time. In fact, from 135 to 324, from 135 to 324 of the Christian calendar, if you look at this time here, for these 200 years, like we discussed before, where the Jews were driven out after their uprisings, meaning that the Greeks and the Persians and the Romans after that allowed them to live in this land, but they rose up against them. The Romans drove them out of Jerusalem, and we said they destroyed the sacred area where Al-Masjid al-Aqsa remains now, not leaving a brick upon another brick, as in the Jewish scriptures. For those 200 years, even the queen of Zenobia of Tadmur, when she entered, she ruled for 3 years. In those 200 years, that area experienced complete tranquility. No problems, no economic problems, no social problems, no political problems, no wars between people. That area experienced complete tranquility. 200 years, the absence of the Jews, and they knew this. The same thing happened over and over again. If you look at other reasons, you can find it within the scriptures. And I'll just mention a few quotes, not exactly, but what the meaning of these scriptures, or what the meanings are in these scriptures. The first thing is that in the Jewish scriptures, we see that they exhibit treachery and arrogance towards others. One of the quotations in the Talmud is that all Gentiles and nations are pagans except the Jew. Everybody is considered a pagan except the Jew. Another abstract says that paradise was created for the Jew and hellfire for everyone else. In another extract, they define themselves as the chosen people of God. And that's why they see themselves superior to other nations. They see that the blood and wealth of other nations is allowed for them, whereas the blood and wealth of the Jew is prohibited. In another quotation, it says, the Gentiles are like a flock of sheep, and verily we are the like of the wolf. So all these things which are present in their books, and not now, I'm talking from those times up until now, they're still present in the books. This bore heavy upon the Christians and upon the Muslims. However, the Christians were closer to this for one of the reasons that the Jews were responsible for the killing of Isa alayhi salam in their scriptures. In our scriptures, we know that they did not actually kill Isa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascended him to the heavens. They say in their books about Isa alayhi salam, criticizing him, saying Jesus was an idol worshipper and a magician, and likewise those who follow him. So the Christians thereafter become idol worshippers and magicians. They speak about the spilling of blood. They say the spilling of blood of a Gentile is an accepted act in the eyes of God and is a means for drawing closer to him. Gentiles meaning non-Jews. They speak about the wealth of Jews being forbidden, and they say also it is forbidden for the Jew to rescue a Gentile or a non-Jew or a foreigner from destruction, or even pull him out of a ditch or hole that he has fallen into, to save him from destruction. Verily, if he were to do that, God would not forgive him. And it says also that he should close that hole with a rock. It says in another part of the Talmud, stealing from a Jew is forbidden, and from a non-Jew it is allowed. In another part it says the life of a non-Jew is the legal possession of the Jew, meaning that all men were created as slaves to the Jews, and his wealth takes precedence, and your wealth is allowed for them. If a Jew returns to a non-Jew a lost possession, the Lord will never forgive him. All of these verses exist in their books. In the Torah and in the Talmud, the commentaries and what teachings are passed down from rabbi to rabbi, generation to generation, these exist. And this shows you that their understanding of others is an understanding of lowliness. They see themselves as being elevated over others, and they see others as being beneath them. What do they say about the prophets, and how was they dealing with the prophets? We spoke about the way they dealt with Musa alayhi salam. They even accused Musa alayhi salam of killing Harun. They drew accusations against the most powerful prophet that he killed his own brother. They accused Isa alayhi salam of being a magician, like we saw. And then subsequently, Isa alayhi salam, the same prophet who came to lift from them burdens that were too heavy for them to bear, they after that accused him and took him to the Roman courts so that it could only be judged upon him that he be executed and killed. The way they treated other prophets and the way that they killed prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that they killed prophets without right. All of these things were known by the Christians. So if they were doing that to their own prophets and ridiculing their own prophets the same way they ridiculed Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they went to him and they said, Assam alaik, meaning poison be upon you, death be upon you. They ridiculed their own prophets and they ridiculed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they knew he is the prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why they found themselves in Medina al-Munawwara in the first place. Their treachery, like we mentioned with the Romans and the Persians, with the Greeks before them, their treachery towards their own prophets, unparalleled. And this is not my words. Look through the history books. Look through the history books and you will find many, countless examples of treachery. H.G. Wells, and there is not the saying of any Muslim. There is H.G. Wells in his book A Short History of the World, mentions, he says, the parable of the Israelite in Palestine after the Babylonian conquest is like a man who is adamant in constructing his dwelling on a busy road, and he is run over by buses and trucks continuously. Meaning, they were never at any time found themselves in that land living peacefully and tranquilly and in complete tranquility with continuous goodness and found any type of sustenance. They always found themselves in a state where they were pushed out, driven out. They caused havoc in the land. In every single way and time, they found themselves in that situation. And in today's time, we see the same thing happening over again. Gustave Le Bon, a Frenchman, says, the Israelites in the history of the first civilization, in his book says, in his book Israelites in the history of the first civilization says, or the Jews in the history of the first civilization says, that the Israelites did not take from the early civilizations except the worst rituals and customs. All that they benefited from the civilizations that they found themselves within, being ruled over by them, were the worst customs and traditions. The same way after the passing of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam, they brought the idols from Babylon and from the surrounding areas which were not controlled by Sulaiman alayhi salam at the time. The way that they look at not only the prophets and other people, but the way that they look at their own Lord, the characteristics that they give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or who they call Yahuwah, their God, in their own books. They describe him in H.G. Wells, they says they see Yahuwah as a miserable, jealous, stingy God. These are not the words of any Muslim or Christian. These are the findings of history and within their own books. It says the history of the Israelites is filled with nothing but reprehensible action. Again, Gustave Le Bon. And if we look at it, these facts hold true. Even in today's time, you'll see that they have not contributed throughout time as a people. They have not contributed to the world in any way as a people. I'm talking in totality. Civilization or being a civilization on their own did not exist. No cuisine, no culture, no science or history that we can look back on, no knowledge base as a people. It is not present that they left anything for the world to benefit from as a people. Even in today's time, the colonial settlers which have come to Palestine and have taken that land by force, till today still take and steal from the customs and the cuisine and the ways of the Palestinians and then claim that it is their own. From their cuisine. They alter the Palestinian cuisine and they claim that it is their own. They take from their culture, from their clothing, from all of these things. They're stealing the culture and clothing and cuisine and history of the Palestinians and then claiming that it is their own. And this is something which is not new, history-based testimony. So this could be the reason why the Christians, knowing all of this and having seen it firsthand, because they were persecuted earlier on by the Jews themselves, when the Romans were not yet Christian, when they were still on their pagan ways, they saw it firsthand, and this knowledge had been passed on to them, and history had borne testimony to what would have happened had they allowed the Jews to live in those lands and to remain as residents. So there is a reason why they instituted that rule. Umar radiallahu anhu, to continue with our history, after establishing Salah in Masjid al-Aqsa for the first time and rebuilding the masjid and taking care of his affairs, or the affairs now of what had been added to the new Muslim empire, to the Islamic empire in the Levant, Palestine, and these areas, thereafter addressed the people of Palestine on his way back to Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara, saying, Ya Ahl al-Islam, O people of Islam, Inna Allah Ta'ala qad sadaqakum al-wa'd. Verily Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has been truthful in his promise to you all. What was the promise? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at the Battle of Al-Ahzab promised the Muslims in one of the incidents that happened when he was breaking a rock that they will open a Sham and they will take the treasures of Kisra and all of this. And at that time, they were facing an army of confederates. All the Arabs had come together. And at their backs are the Jews who have now broken the pact that was with them, and they are being stabbed in the back by the Jews who are inside Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. And at that time, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is telling them that they will open these lands. So Umar radiallahu anhu is reminding them that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is truthful in his promise. And then he said, وَنَصَرَكُمْ عَلَى الْأَعْدَاءِ, and he has given you all victory over your enemies. وَأَوْرَثَكُمُ الْبِلَادِ, and he has made you all inheritors of this land. وَمَكَّنَ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and he has given you all strength and dominion. فَلَا يَكُونُ جَزَاؤُهُ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا الشُّكْرِ. So let it not be that your actions to him be only gratitude. Your actions to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala should only be gratitude for what he has bestowed upon you all. وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَالْعَمَلْ بِالْمَعَاصِي, and he said, and I warn you all of sinful actions. فَإِنَّ الْعَمَلَ بِالْمَعَاصِي كُفْرٌ بِالنِّعَمِ. Verily, sinful actions and disobedience to God, to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, is being ungrateful for the bounties that he has bestowed upon you all. وَقَلَّمَا كَفَرَ قَوْمٌ بِمَا أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. And very few a time has a people been ungrateful for the bounties of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala upon them. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَفْزَعُوا إِلَى التَّوْبَةِ, and have not returned hastily to beg pardon. إِلَّا صُلِبُوا عِزُّهُمْ, except that their honor has been taken away from them. وَسَلَّطَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ عَدُوَّهُمْ, and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has set forth upon them their enemies. So Umar radiallahu anhu now leaves them with this advice and heads back to Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. Palestine had been opened up in entirety except one city, which was the Roman port city and an extremely well guarded, fortified city of Caesarea. This city, which is on the Mediterranean coast, was a big port city, one of the biggest port cities of the Romans, extremely well fortified from the outside, and it could receive aid from the Mediterranean Sea. And this city took a long time to fall, but eventually it fell in the year 19 AH at the hands of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Before that, his brother Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan laid siege, and he was the one who eventually opened the city. And like we said, it took a long time because the city was receiving aid and food and reinforcements from the Romans through the Mediterranean Sea. During that time, in the year 18 AH, after these events, a catastrophe occurred in this region of Palestine, in the region of the Levant, which was a plague which had spread from the city of Amwas, and it's known as Ta'un Amwas in the history. And this plague claimed the lives of 18,000 Muslims, and from them many Sahaba. And we said before, the armies were only between 34 and 39,000. And some of them had already left to Egypt, some of them had already moved out to other areas. So 18,000 was a great number of Muslims that had passed away in that land. And we know in this plague that some great Sahaba passed away. From them, Abu Ubaidah, Amir ibn al-Jarrah, the leader of the armies in Sham. We know that Shurahbil ibn Hasana passed away. Mu'adh ibn Jabal passed away in this plague. Al-Fadl ibn Abbas also passed away, the son of the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Suhail ibn Amr passed away. Al-Harith ibn Hisham, the brother of Abu Jahl, who had accepted Islam at the conquest of Mecca, he passed away. And he had actually come with 70 of his family members from Mecca to Asham, and from them 66 passed away. Only 4 remained out of the 70. Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu lost 18 of his children, of his sons, in this plague. So this plague was a great tragedy to the Muslims at the time, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thereafter removed it from them. And as we said, that this land of Palestine thereafter had become totally unified under the Muslims. After only a short period of this land forming part of the Islamic Empire, coming under the control of the Muslims, did most of the people of Palestine, the inhabitants from the Arab tribes that lived there, like we mentioned, Al-Kin'aniyun, Wal-Amuriyun, all these tribes, their descendants, and the Christians who had come to that land or converted to Christianity, or who were Romans that thereafter lived there in the land of Palestine, most of them became Muslim. Even the Jews who lived in the diaspora outside Jerusalem, but were under Muslim rule, became Muslim. So the claim that Jews were driven out of the land by the Muslims is untrue. And the claim that Christians were forced to become Muslim is not true. Because if you look at the assurance of Umar ibn al-Khattab, it would leave no doubt that it would be easy for you to practice your religion. And as we said, the jizya is cheaper, or was cheaper in the time of Umar, 1 dinar, than what somebody would have paid zakat on their wealth. So there was no force in becoming a Muslim, but most Muslims, or most of the inhabitants, became Muslim at that time. Field Marshal Montgomery says in his book, A History of Warfare, he mentions and alludes to this, and he says, Islamic conquest had reached where no conquest before them had reached. Because their armies were welcome as freedom fighters. When the people saw the Muslim armies coming and take control, and the justice that was shown, the justice and tolerance that was shown by the Muslims, they welcomed them, and then most of them, through the actions of the Muslims, became Muslims and not through force. He says that the armies were welcome as freedom fighters for their qualities of humanity and civility. They were civil and they showed humanity to others, so people entered the fold of Islam in this way. And this was how Palestine and the Levant had now become under the rule of the Muslims and had changed in almost totality to the religion of Islam. And Umar radiallahu anhu thereafter leaving the lands of the Levant, appointed after the plague of Amwas Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan as the governor of these lands, and he governed from Damascus. And inshallah, in our next lecture, we will continue speaking about what had occurred thereafter in the lands of Palestine, and Palestine in the time of the caliphs that came after, those from Bani Umayyah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.